In the vast universe of Indian mythology, there are gods who are worshipped, kings who are celebrated, and warriors who are remembered. But there is one man, just one, whose story does not inspire worship or celebration. It inspires something far more powerful. It inspires grief. This is the story of Karna, the greatest archer who ever lived, the most generous soul the world has ever known, and the most unlucky man in all of creation. This is his story. Long before the great war of Kurukshetra, long before the Pandavas and Kauravas were even born, there was a young princess named Kunti, curious, fearless, and blessed with a divine mantra by the sage Durvasa, a mantra that could summon any god she wished. One morning, overcome by youthful curiosity, Kunti whispered the mantra toward the rising sun, and the sky broke open. Surya, the sun. God himself descended before her, radiant and blinding, and offered her a son who would carry the divine armor of the gods, Kavacha and Kundala, fused into his very skin at birth, indestructible, eternal. But Kunti was not yet married. Terrified of what the world would say, she did the unthinkable. She placed her newborn son into a small wooden box, and she set him adrift on the river Ganga. In that single moment of fear, Kunti had set in motion a tragedy that would take decades to unfold. The wooden box drifted downstream, past sleeping ghats, past sacred temples, past fishermen who had not yet woken. It carried inside it a child who glowed like a small sun, armored, divine, and completely alone. He did not cry. Perhaps he already understood what the world had done to him, or perhaps the gods were watching closely enough to keep him calm. The river Ganga, sacred, eternal, mother to all, carried him gently forward, toward a man who would give him something his own mother could not, a home. The wooden box drifted until it reached the hands of Adhiratha, a charioteer, a humble man, a good man. He and his wife Radha had prayed for a child for years. When they opened the box and saw the glowing infant inside, wrapped in celestial armor, they did not ask questions. They did not wonder where he came from, or why he glowed like the sun. They simply held him close, and named him Vasusena. But the world would come to know him as Karna, the one born with earrings. He had lost a mother, but he had found a home, and for now, that was enough. Karna grew up in a charioteer's home. He ate simple meals, wore simple clothes, and lived a simple life. But inside, oh, inside, there burned something extraordinary, an obsession, a fire. He wanted to be the greatest warrior in the world, not for pride, not for revenge, but because something in his blood, something divine and unquenchable, drove him toward the battlefield the way rivers are driven toward the sea. He trained every single day. Before sunrise, when the world was still dark and silent, Karna would stand alone with his bow and arrow, practicing, not because someone told him to, but because he could not stop. Karna approached the great Brahmin teacher Parashurama and lied about his identity, claiming to be a Brahmin, so that he could learn the most powerful weapon in existence, the Brahmastra. Parashurama taught him everything. He saw in Karna a dedication that surpassed all his other students, a hunger that could not be filled, and for a time Karna was happy, truly, completely happy. He had a guru, he had knowledge, he had purpose, but fate, as always, was watching, waiting for its moment. One afternoon, as Parashurama slept on his lap, a terrible worm began to bore into Karna's thigh. The pain was unbearable, but Karna did not move, did not flinch, did not cry out, because he refused, absolutely refused, to disturb his sleeping teacher. When Parashurama woke and saw the blood, he knew immediately. No Brahmin could endure such pain in silence. Only a Kshatriya warrior could. And in his fury at the deception, Parashurama cursed Karna that at the moment he needed the Brahmastra most, in the most critical moment of his life, he would forget it completely. One man, one more curse, added to a life already full of them. When the time came for the great tournament at Hastinapur, where the princes of the Kuru dynasty would display their skills before the entire kingdom, Karna arrived, not as a prince, not as an invited guest, but as a man who had spent his entire life preparing for this moment without anyone asking him to. The arena was full. The king watched from his throne. The crowd buzzed with excitement. And at the center of it all, Arjuna performed, arrow after arrow, perfect, precise, breathtaking. The crowd roared, and then, from the edge of the arena, a figure stepped forward, uninvited, unannounced, and asked for a chance to compete. He matched every single thing Arjuna had done. Arrow for arrow, skill for skill, move for move. The crowd went silent. Who was this man? Where did he come from? And then the great teacher Drona stepped forward. Kripacharya raised his voice, and in front of thousands of people, they asked Karna the one question that would haunt him for the rest of his life. What is your lineage? What is your father's name? A son of a charioteer cannot compete with princes. The arena erupted in laughter. Karna stood alone, his armor gleaming, his bow in hand, his face burning, as the entire kingdom of Hastinapur laughed at him, not because he was weak, but because of who his father was. It was in that moment of absolute darkness that one man stepped forward. Duryodhana, prince of the Kauravas, walked into the center of that arena, took Karna by the hand, and crowned him king of Anga on the spot. His lineage does not matter, Duryodhana declared to the entire kingdom. His skill is his identity. From this day forward, Karna is a king. The crowd fell silent, and Karna, for the first time in his life, had a friend. Someone who saw him not as a charioteer's son, but as what he truly was. From that day, Karna gave Duryodhana something that kings spend their entire lives trying to buy: absolute loyalty, not out of debt, but because Duryodhana had given Karna the one thing the world had always denied him: dignity. On the morning before the war of Kurukshetra, the god Indra, Arjuna's divine father, came to Karna disguised as an old Brahmin. He had come to take away Karna's greatest protection. The divine armor and earrings fused into his skin since birth. The kavacha and kundala that made him virtually indestructible. Indra knew that without it, Karna could be killed. That was exactly the point. And here is where the story breaks your heart. Karna knew. He saw through the disguise. He knew this old man was Indra. He knew what was being asked. He knew that giving away his armor meant giving away his life. And he smiled and said yes. With his bare hands, he cut the armor from his own body, from his living flesh, and placed it in Indra's hands, smiling. Because Karna had made a vow, he would never turn away anyone who came to him asking for a gift, not even if it cost him his life. Indra, humbled and ashamed, stood before this mortal man who had just outshone every god in heaven through sheer grace. He gave Karna one divine weapon in return, the Vasava Shakti, a spear that could kill anyone. One use, only one. Karna held it close and saved it, not for Arjuna, but for a friend who needed it more. Just days before the war began, Kunti came to Karna, his mother, the woman who had set him adrift on a river the morning he was born. She told him the truth, that she was his mother, that the Pandavas were his brothers, that if he joined them, he would be celebrated as the eldest Pandava, greater even than Yudhishthira. Karna listened in silence, and then he said something that echoes across thousands of years. Mother, where were you when the world was laughing at me? Duryodhana gave me my dignity when no one else would. I cannot betray him, not for a crown, not for brothers I never knew, not even for you. But I will make you one promise. At the end of this war, you will still have 5 sons, always 5. He kept that promise, at the cost of his own life. On the 17th day of the war of Kurukshetra, the curses came alive. Karna's chariot wheels sank deep into the earth. He climbed down from his chariot, the greatest warrior of his age, and pulled at the wheel with both hands, with everything he had. It would not move. The mud held it like fate itself had reached up from the ground and grabbed it, like the earth was collecting a debt that had been owed for years. He was unarmed, defenseless, the most dangerous man on the battlefield, now completely vulnerable, and he called out across the smoke and chaos of Kurukshetra, "Wait, a true warrior does not strike a man who cannot fight. Give me just one moment." The words hung in the air, and Krishna, standing beside Arjuna, watching everything, made a choice that people have debated for 3,000 years. The arrow flew, Karna fell, and the greatest warrior of his age died in the mud, not in a moment of glory, but in a moment of helplessness. When his body was found, the ground around him was soaked, not just in blood, but in gold, because even in death, Karna had given everything he had. Karna was not a god, he was not a demon, he was a man caught between birth and destiny, between loyalty and truth, between who the world said he was and who he knew himself to be. He was rejected by his mother, mocked by his teachers, laughed at by kings, and cursed by fate itself. And yet he never became bitter. He never stopped being generous. He never stopped being loyal. Perhaps that is why, thousands of years later, we still say his name with something that feels less like admiration and more like an ache. This has been Shrunoti, ancient Indian stories told the way they were meant to be heard. If Karna's story moved you, subscribe, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and come back tomorrow, because there are thousands more stories waiting, and every single one of them will change the way you see the world.